In this lesson, we're going to take a look at factoring some trinomials using a method known as the AC method. Now, we've already seen factoring trinomials once before, but these ones are going to be a little bit more complicated in that our squared term will be something other than the number 1. This is why we're going to pick up the AC method, so we have a little bit more of an algebraic way to approach these types of problems. So recall some of the earlier trinomials that we've been factoring so far. The squared term in front has always been a 1. And that's made life, pretty easy on us, because when we went searching for those two binomials to really break it down into, we really didn't have a whole lot of options in order to get that first term. It was probably something like y and y or x and x. Now, there wasn't really a whole lot of other things it could be. Now, the reason why this made things a little bit easier is we really only had to focus on the last term and making sure our outside and inside terms combined to give us the middle term. Now, we don't want to necessarily stick with those types of trinomials. Now we want to go ahead and factor things where the initial term is something other than 1. Now, this will end up making things a little bit more difficult. The good news is, with these ones, you can still use something like the reverse FOIL method. But now you have not only possibilities for, say, your first term, but now you also have possibilities for, your first and your last term, both of those. So this will make things a little bit more difficult when we're checking to make sure that the outside and inside terms actually combine to give us that middle term. Let's do a reverse FOIL example so you can see that we have to track down many more possibilities. This one's 2x squared plus 7x plus 6. So it's not that big. But we'll look at the two binomials that we are looking to break this down into. Okay, so like before, I'd be looking for two terms that multiplied to give us the 2x squared. And since that number is there, I have to look at possible things that will give us 2. Well, this one's not too bad. It has to be 1 and 2. And of course, to get that x squared, 1x, 2x. Okay? Now we look at the possibilities that will give us our second term. So a 6, well, it could be 1 and 6, could be 2 and 3, or it could actually be those values, say, flipped around. All right. So the question is, what should it be? What things are we looking for here? Well, I know that these two numbers, whatever they are, looks like they both better be positive, since these are both positive. So it could be, say, 1 and 6, or it could be 2 and 3. Well, let's go ahead and put one of those in there just to see what happens. So let's suppose I'm trying out 1 and I'm trying out 6. Well, my first terms multiply out just fine. My last terms multiply out just fine. So let's check out our outside and inside terms. The outside would give us a 6x, and the inside would give us a 2x. And when you combine those together, you get 8x, which unfortunately is not the same as that middle term. So I need to come up with some other choice for those last terms. Let's see, if it's not 1 and 6, I guess we got to try 2 and 3. So we'll put those in there. And we'll double check our outside and inside terms. So outside would be a 3x, inside would be a 4x, and sure enough, those do combine to give us that 7x. So the important part to recognize is that if your initial term is something other than 1, you have to look at your possibilities for your last term and your first term, and really play around with how they're ordered in order to get your proper factorization. All right, not bad. Let's try another one that has a few more possibilities for that first term, just to make things, a little bit more interesting. All right, so looking at the first term, we need something that will multiply and give us 6y squared. Well, that could be 1 and 6, could be 2 and 3, but they both will definitely contain a y because of that y squared. Looking at our last terms, many different things could multiply and give us a 10. 1 and 10, 2 and 5, or possibly those just reversed around. So I have lots of different options that I can end up packaging this together. Maybe this is a 1 and 6 with the 1 and 10. Or maybe I should use the 2 and 3 with the 1 and 10, or the 1 and 6 with the 2 and 5, or the 2 and 3 with the 2 and 5. There's many different ways, and I can also do these in different orders to make sure that they combine. And really, the key for figuring out, well, which combination should you use is looking at those outside and inside terms. In this one, we want them to combine to give us that 19, so we're definitely going to have to do a little bit of work to figure out what that is. Let's see, for the current setup, my outside would be 10y and my inside would be 6y, which unfortunately does not combine enough to give us that 19y in the middle. So I know that my 1 and 6 and my 1 and 10, I need to change something around. This one's just not going to work that way. Let's play around with our, let's do our first terms. Let's try something else for the beginning here. Let's try 2 and 3. All right, what would that give us? So I can see the outside is 20y, the inside is 3y. Oh, that's a little too much. 23y, not going to work out. All right, well, the good news is I did do this one earlier, so I do have the combination that will actually factor. What we are looking for this one is 2, 3, 5, and 2. Now let's check the outside and inside terms for this guy. So the outside would be a 4y, and the inside would be a 15y, and sure enough, those combine to give us a 19y. So I know that this is the proper factorization. Now what this really highlights is that when your initial term is something other than a 1 and you have lots and lots of possibilities to run through, it can be very difficult to find out just the right combination of numbers to use in order to make it all work out correctly. And in fact, if my numbers were even bigger, I would have even more possibilities to run through. So this is kind of a problem. Well, to fix this problem where our leading term is something other than 1, and our numbers could get fairly large, well, we don't necessarily want to use the reverse FOIL method. There are simply too many possibilities to consider for some problems, and it gets too difficult. This is why we're going to pick up something known as the AC method. This is a little bit more of an algebraic method that we can use and hunt down some of the possibilities we need for breaking it down. Let me quickly run you through how the AC method works, and then I'll give you some quick tips on using it. So the very first thing that you want to do when using the AC method is just to see if everything has a common factor or not. And if it does have a common factor, go ahead and factor that out before beginning any other type of factoring process. So if they all have a 2 in common, pull it out. Then you're going to multiply the first and the last terms together. This is known as the A and C terms, and it's where the method gets its name. Once you get that new number, you'll be looking for 2 new numbers that multiply to give you a C, and they actually add to get you B. Now this will have the feel of looking for those 2 integers, but it will be a little bit more straightforward than what you've seen in the past. And I do have a nice way to organize that step so you keep track of the 2 numbers you're looking for. Now here comes the interesting part. When you find those 2 numbers, you'll actually split up your middle term into 2 new numbers, and then you will have 4 terms total, and you'll actually use factor by grouping to move from there. So the AC method is really a way of kind of splitting up your middle term and using a different approach, that factor by grouping, to handle it instead. Now let me give you some tips on using the AC method. When you use the AC method, you really want to organize where your AC and your B terms go. And what I really recommend is that you draw, say, a small X. In the top part of that X, you'll put the values of A multiplied by C. And in the bottom part of that X, you'll put the value of B. And what you're looking to do is you want to fill out the rest of this X by putting in these 2 numbers. Now, the numbers that will go there, they must multiply to give you that top number, and they must add to give you the bottom number. It'll feel like you're filling out a very small crossword. Be very careful in doing this. Also make sure that the signs match up. So if you need to add to give you a negative number, then make sure the two side numbers really will add to give you that negative number. Always be careful on your signs with this one. They should match up. All right, so you've heard a lot about the AC method. Haven't seen it yet? Let's go ahead and do an example so you can see it all in action.